ngani bono yeba sheta gombo no manone sipagno no buno.
Good evening, Zambia. Thank you so much for joining us for this 6th edition of Costa Cross-Examination. I'm your host. My name is Andrew Mwansa, sitting in for Costa Mwansa. With just 123 days standing between now and August 13th, 2026, the country once again is edging closer to a defining moment at the ballot box. The countdown is no longer distant, it is real and it is urgent, and it is demanding answers from the Zambian people. As the nation prepares to decide its future, a critical question emerges. What exactly is the opposition offering to the Zambian people? Beyond calls for change and political rhetoric, are there clear, practical solutions being presented to address the everyday struggles citizens face? From rising poverty levels to the high cost of living, unemployment and economic uncertainty, Zambians are not just looking for promises. They are searching for leadership that understands their reality and has a credible plan to transform it. But is the opposition ready? Are they united enough to inspire confidence? Do they have a coherent vision that goes beyond criticism of the current government? And more importantly, can they convincingly demonstrate that they are prepared to tackle poverty in a meaningful and sustainable way? It's channel 27 on DSTV and channel 20 on GoTV. This is Costa's Cross-Examination. I'm your host once again. My name is Andrew Mwansa. Tonight on Costa's Cross-Examination, we put these questions into focus as we engage President of the Patriots for Economic Progress, Mr. Tembo. We discuss the road to 2026 and what his party is truly offering Zambians ahead of this general election. Mr. Tembo, you are summoned to Costa's Cross-Examination.
Thank you, Mr. Mwansa. It's a pleasure to be here. And of course, a very good evening to all the viewers out there.
Political parties are having their General Assemblies. Just today, we saw President Hakainde Hichilema successfully filing his nomination to be presidential candidate of the UPND ahead of the General Assembly that is taking place on the 15th of April, their General Assembly. Obviously, he has gone unopposed. And the question perhaps I should start with is, has Patriots for Economic Progress already had their convention?
Yes, we did. You know, for us, Mr. Mwansa, we do things a little bit unconventionally. So we don't believe in doing the convention in the year of the election. This is a point I've stressed a few times. We hold our convention immediately after the election for the simple reason that by its very nature, democracy tends to hurt a few people. So you want enough period for people to recuperate and to reunite. Our observations have been that when you hold the convention in the year of the election, most of the time you head into the election as a divided party, because those who have lost positions would be still squabbling with those who have won certain positions. So we held our convention in November of 2021, and we shall be holding our next convention in December of this year.
Even when you are president, it will still go on, you still hold the convention?
Yes, of course.
Did you also go unopposed, or you had competitors in this convention?
Unfortunately, I went unopposed. I went unopposed. You know, generally speaking, you know, as an opposition leader, I would tell you that there are very few, you know, people out there, citizens, who are willing to be an opposition leader, especially someone willing to take on the shoes of Tembo. A lot of people think that it is adverse to their personal interests, to their families, to their business interests, and so on and so forth, which is regrettable because it kind of narrows the democratic space. Of course, there are good reasons for that. You know, if you count the number of times I spent in cells for no good reason, you know, if you count the number of times the police came to my house, breaking down doors to my house, then you can understand why people wouldn't have appetite to fit into my shoes. But I look forward to a day when Zambia will have a conducive environment for opposition politics, whereby we shall be able to attract a lot more people to participate in opposition politics.
Are you shocked that President Hakainde Hichilema has gone unopposed? Him having a platform that is much more, you know, lucrative, and that people would have ideally wanted to take off?
Well, I'm not shocked. Primarily because of the nature of our politics in Zambia, you know, whereby if someone is head of state, you know, everybody around them hero worships them, and nobody wants to really challenge them or tell them the truth. Everybody just becomes a puppet, starting from the cabinet to the party. Everyone becomes a puppet. That's the nature of our politics in Zambia. It's not the first time that it's happening like this. It's always been like this. Even during PF times, it was the same. During MMD times, it was the same. During UNIP times, it was the same. So it's not something new. Again, I look forward to a day when we're going to change the color of our politics, whereby we can introduce a little bit more objectivity, and whereby we can stop, you know, hero worshipping or treating people as semi-gods, those who become Republican presidents. Because the true value of a Republican president is really derived from the people that surround them, for as long as they are objective. So when you are surrounded by people and those people are not objective, then it will undermine your presidency as a Republican president. That's my observation. And when I become president of this country, I'll see to it that I create an environment which will enable people to say the truth to me. I don't want to intimidate people. I don't want people who come to me and hero worship me, sing praises to me. I will not want to be surrounded by such people, because they will not help me become a better president. The only way I can become a better president is if people tell me the truth. If I err, people come and say, our President Paja, Simnashtebwe.
Do you consider yourself as a formidable opposition, as PEP?
Yes, of course. Of course. We have the experience. You know, we fought running battles with the previous government, the Patriotic Front government, and now we are fighting running battles with the current government, the UPND government. So we have the experience. We know how to navigate ourselves in the political space, and we are also a credible opposition in the sense that we are the only opposition political party in this country that has consistently and continuously offered credible alternative solutions through our annual alternative national budgets, where we are trying our alternative, you know, solutions to national problems. You know, how we can turn around the economy, how we can encourage entrepreneurship, how we can resolve the issue of youth unemployment. That is well documented in our alternative national budgets. And I know Zambians are not really in the habit of reading, which is regrettable. But a lot more Zambians over the past couple of years have taken interest in our alternative solutions, and a lot more have come on board. Even the caliber of candidates we've been able to attract for this upcoming election, in terms of parliamentary candidates, you know, local government candidates, they are a little bit of a higher caliber compared to the candidates who were able to attract in 2021. So we are very confident about our fortunes in this upcoming election.
Would you say you have structures across the country that are intact?
I wouldn't say across the country, like 100% structures, but we do have skeleton structures across the country. In certain areas, we have full structures. In other areas, we have skeleton structures, whereby maybe at constituency level, let's say we're supposed to have about 24 officials. Out of those 24 officials, maybe we have maybe 7 or 8 officials out of the 24. In other areas, it's much better. Out of the 24, we would have maybe 18 or 19. In other areas, it's even much worse. Instead of 24 per level, would have maybe 4 or 5. But we have skeleton structures across the whole country.
What is the membership like for PEP as of your last calendar?
In terms of the paid up members, so you know, we have various categories of members. For you to be a member of PEP, just an ordinary member of PEP, you don't need to pay any subscription. You just join and you're a member, and we keep a database for that. If you want to hold a position within the Patriots for Economic Progress, you need to be a paid up member. And our annual membership fee is 60 kwacha. It has been at 60 kwacha for the past couple of years, I think about 4 years or so. So it depends really on the membership category. If you say the paid up members,
to get all of them together.
Yeah, I don't really keep count with the non-paid up members because everyone has got a mandate at constituency level to admit members on a continuous basis. But in terms of the paid up members in the party, I would say the last time I checked from our chairman for the Treasury, we were about close to 4,000 members across the country, and those are people who are holding positions. And then we have people who are just ordinary members. My guess is that the ordinary members who do not need to pay any subscription should be hovering at about plus or minus 200, 300,000 across the country. Yeah.
How is it possible, Mr. Tembo, when the results in your last election don't reflect the membership across the country? Because in the last election, you only got 1,813 votes. That was a representation of about 0.04% of the total vote cast. How is it that your own members that you say are in the thousands?
So we're talking about now, not prior to 2021.
Prior to 2021.
Not prior to 2021. We're talking about now, what our membership is now. You understand? I must mention to you, Mr. Mansa, that, you know, for me, when I decided to join politics, I wasn't a public figure. I was just, you know, just an ordinary chartered accountant, you know, running my audit firm. And so the beginning of my political fortunes were significantly different from those who maybe they were a cabinet minister, and then they decided to quit and start a political party, you know, like Honorable Karawa. He was in the public domain. So someone who was in the public domain will start with a certain level of momentum. Others were public figures, maybe not in politics. For instance, Dr. Fred Membe, he was a well-known editor of a very public and popular newspaper. So he was already in the public domain. So for me, nobody knew me. You understand? So I had to start from scratch and convince people and tell them, here I am, my name is Sean Tembo, this is what I believe in, this is our political party, I'm asking you to support us. So we started from a relatively low momentum, and that is why we didn't score very well in 2021. But our momentum since skyrocketed. You understand? As we speak right now, I can assure you that Sean Tembo is a household name wherever you go across the country. Right now, I'm sure you do recall when we last spoke. Yes, we were coming from Western Province. We were in Mongo for a couple of days. We were inspecting our structures, meeting people, meeting some chiefs. On our way back, we decided to spend the night in Mombwa. We attended a church service in the morning today at United Church of Zambia. We visited Chief Mumba, we visited Chief, a few other chiefs, I can't recall all their names. And we inspected some structures in Nangoma, in Shibuyunji, until we came to Lusaka. So I can confidently say that I think the people are committed in terms of our membership. They are committed. And these are not people whom you buy to support you, you give money to support you. No, no, no. These are people who are supporting you from the bottom of their hearts because they believe in your vision for this country. They believe that you can change things. They believe that you can turn around the fortunes of Zambia. You understand? So for me, in terms of where we started from as a non-entity to where we are today, I can say we've made a lot of inroads, huge, significant inroads actually, and I'm very proud of my team, and I'm actually very proud of myself in terms of the progress I've made. Yes.
What are you basing this progress off of? Is it because of the membership that has come through, or perhaps there's some standard you're basing this popularity or household name you're talking about? Because there's a school of thought that now President Tembo is known by many people because of social media, because of probably the
just like HH was known by many people through social media. You know, Andrew, the nature of our opposition politics in Zambia, you cannot run away from using social media. The reason is simple. Just like the case was with HH, he was blocked from being able to meet the people. When you try to meet the people, you are charged with an unlawful assembly and so on and so forth. So the challenges that HH faced when he was an opposition leader are the exact same challenges that he is making us face as opposition leaders. So when you are prevented from physically meeting people, because even us, when we go to meet people, we meet people through the disguise of attending a church service, or the disguise of visiting a chief. While you're visiting that chief, people gather, you meet them, you address them. You understand? So we are not able to really just go on the ground and meet our structures freely. We are waiting, of course, for the official 3 months campaign period, where we will not be restricted in terms of our ability to interact with our supporters and our members. But inevitably, you can't wait the entire 5 years just to utilize the last 3 months. It can't work. So in the interim, before the last 3 months, you need to make do with what is available. And what is available is social media. Social media helped propel the UPND into office because they didn't have any space to maneuver under the PF government. And ourselves equally, we've been able to utilize social media, and it has served us very well.
Yes. Do you think some of the things that you write on social media build the country, or perhaps people don't take you seriously? For example, when you crack some jokes that are targeted towards certain individuals, quote unquote, do you think that makes you popular as a candidate, or perhaps people look at it that these are just jokes that President Tembo is?
Mr. Mansa, people are very serious with their lives. You understand? They have to make a living. They are going through pressure at work. They are going through pressure as a family. You understand? At family level, and so on and so forth. Other pressures. You understand? So for us, our approach, even just in terms of a personality, there are different types of people. You understand? Some people adopt like an unusually serious posture, like everything is serious. You never smile, you never crack a joke, you understand? That's their nature, that's their personality. And then some people are humorous. You understand? Some people are humorous. Even at the funeral, you go at the funeral, you cry for a few minutes, and then once you're done crying, you try to soothe the people who are bereaved, and then you have a chat, and then you say one or two humorous things, and then they smile. You understand? So it's the nature of people. So my nature is that I'm a humorous person. I'm a humorous person. I find humor in a lot of things. And that's my nature, even at home with my children. When I walk in, my children run to me and we sit and we chat and we laugh. I'm not the father whereby when I walk into the house, everybody disappears into their bedrooms. I'm sure you know their fathers like that. Yeah, so it really depends on the personality of a person. But your personality does not really take away the substance of what you really do or what you actually say. You understand? It doesn't. In my case, as a party, for instance, there are a lot of political parties in this country, and most of them have been there longer than us. You understand? But in terms of delivery, I can, confidently argue that the Patriots for Economic Progress, my party, is the only party that has developed and presented alternative national budgets on a consistent basis for the past 8 years. I'm sure you would agree, unless you know of any other political party. And what sure way, excuse me, what sure way to, present your model of developing the country than documented alternative solutions to national problems. You understand? So, in as much as we might have an appetite for humor, we might have appetite to share light moments with people. In terms of delivery, we are far, ahead of our competition. Our competition don't even come close. It's just that, in terms of voting, people are not always objective. Some people tend to be swept by the wind and so on and so forth, which is understood. But if voting was based on an objective basis, there would have been no question that the next president of the Republic of Zambia should be Tembo. There would be no question about it. You understand? Because we are the most competent. We are the most professional in terms of engaging the government. We engage the government and tell them this and this is not adding up. Can you explain? Most of the time they don't answer us. Sometimes they do answer us. But we are the most punchy. When we talk, if we decide to talk, then even the president knows that Tembo has spoken today. You understand? Other people talk. They talk their lungs out without having an impact. When we talk, when we decide to talk, there is an impact. So if politics was really an objective game, then there would be no question as to who should be the next president of the Republic of Zambia, because that person is definitely Tembo.
The few times that President Hakainde Hichilema has spoken about you, he's spoken about you not in a very good way.
Oh, he's my competitor. Do you expect him to say good things about me? Because the moment he says good things about me, he would be preparing me. I must mention also that I was quite disappointed with him on the issue of, those days when I was calling him to make follow-ups for the farmer payments. And then he made a comment when he features, I think it was on Diamond TV, where he was saying that Tembo has my number, and Tembo should not be calling me while he's live on his page to follow up farmer payments. His grandstanding and so on and so forth. I was disappointed with that, because the issue here is that you as a government, him as head of state, got maize from farmers as far back as May of last year, and that time was February. So you are talking about 7-8 months, and you haven't paid these people. So instead of addressing side issues of whether Tembo is grandstanding by calling you daily on your cell phone, on your personal cell phone, or not, address the main issue. The main issue is that you got maize from farmers for 8 months and you haven't paid them. So when he called in, I don't know if he called in, I think he called in, I can't recall exactly, and you're saying, no, Tembo should not be grandstanding over the issue of farmer payments because he's got my number, he should call me privately. Why should I call the president privately? Because when I call him privately, people will think I'm looking for a job from him. So it's better I call him publicly while people are monitoring the conversation. And I tell him, Mr. President, sir, my farmers are.
Wouldn't you want a job from him?
Sorry?
Wouldn't you want a job from him?
No.
Wouldn't you want a job from him?
Of course not. Of course not. You won't ask me why. Why not?
Why not?
I don't believe in his model for managing this country. I think his model for managing this country is a disaster, and I wouldn't want to be part of that disaster. The UPND, Mr. Mansa, the UPND is a party which, in my view, perhaps was not prepared when it came into office. The UPND is a party which was propelled into office through propaganda. Of course, the PF made a lot of mistakes, but the UPND were able to successfully, blow those mistakes by a factor of 10 to 20 and they make them bigger than they really were. And then through that propaganda, well-coordinated propaganda, they ended up ascending into office. Now, you know, propaganda is not something new that, you know, political parties have used as a way of winning political power. Even from time immemorial, people have used propaganda. But the mistake of the UPND, in my view, is that even after ascending into office using propaganda, they did not want to abandon propaganda, so that they are sincere now to the people and deal with people on,
for example,
an honest basis.
For example, give an example of the propaganda.
Okay. So look at the issue of CDF, for instance, which is a major campaign issue. CDF, Constituency Development Fund. The UPND have been able to try and spin CDF and say, no, we increased CDF from the 1.6 million it was to the, is it 33 million now it is?
40 million.
Well, yeah, it can be 40 million or whatever it is. And therefore, we've done more for the people because we've increased CDF. You understand? But when you look at the specifics, which we do as Patriots for Economic Progress, because I come from a financial background, look at the specifics. When CDF was 1.6 million, what was it covering? It was just for petty community projects. You understand? Eh? Now that it is 40 million, what is it covering? It's covering operations for the Ministry of Home Affairs. The Land Cruisers have to be bought under CDF, police transport and so on. It covers operations for Ministry of Health. It covers operations for Ministry of Education. So you've gotten budget lines from 3 ministries and squeezed them into CDF. Okay? And you're saying we've increased CDF, and yet it is covering more responsibility. Now, the fundamental question here, Mr. Massa, is what were the amounts for each of these 3 budget lines as they lay in their individual ministries? What were they before taking them away from there and putting them under CDF? When you add the budget lines prior to 2022, national budget, you find that the operational budgets for those 3 ministries were adding up to more than $1 billion. So in other words, what the UPND did was to reduce the operational budget for the 3 ministries, Home Affairs, Health, and Education, from more than $1 billion kwacha to just about 1.6 billion. I mean, from more than, when you look at the total CDF, the total CDF is coming to about 1.7 billion. And those budget lines, as they lay in their individual ministries, each ministry was more than $1 billion kwacha. So when you put them together, they were more than 3 billion kwacha. So they actually halved the budget by taking those budget lines and bringing them to CDF. I'll give you a practical example. The police transport, the police Land Cruisers, prior to these CDF Land Cruisers, the last time the police bought vehicles was in 2011 under RB, just before the election, the Blue Land Cruisers. And when RB bought those Land Cruisers, he bought per police station. You understand? Eh? Each police station, they bought a Land Cruiser for them. Okay, that was under RB when the budget line was under Home Affairs. Okay, now, when the UPND moved the budget line from Home Affairs and other ministries to CDF, and they bought Land Cruisers for police stations, they bought 1 Land Cruiser per constituency. You understand? Not per police station, but per constituency. And you have a lot of constituencies which actually have more than 1 police station. A case in point is even Munali here. Okay, Munali constituency has Le Soleil police station. It has Choson police station. It has Simon Mansarapwepe police station. And also has what used to be IBEX, now Twin Palm police station. So we've got 4 police stations.
Mtendere police station
is now, yes, Mtendere is also a station now. It's not a post. Yes. So you also have Mtendere police station. You understand? And all these are under 1 constituency. And under CDF, which we are told, no, we are allocating more money to the people. You buy 1 Land Cruiser and you give to 4 police stations or 5 police stations. That is actually reducing the allocation of resources to the people. And that, Mr. Mansa, is premised on propaganda. On the face of it, someone who is in the compound will not understand to say, so is CDF, can she, even if they've increased, the responsibilities are more now than they were when it was 1.6. And these individual budget lines for Home Affairs, Health, and Education, when you add them up, it's actually even more than double what the allocation is under CDF. So CDF on paper it looks like they've increased the allocation from 1.6 to 40 million, but in reality, the allocation of expenditure to the people has actually halved.
How will things look like in the PEP government in terms of CDF? Would you return things?
So that is well covered in our manifesto. First of all, my government, Mr. Mansa, my government will be premised on honesty with the people. We're not going to run our government based on propaganda like the UPND are doing. You know, we are not going to run our government based on hoodwinking the people. No, no, no. We're not going to do that. We are going to run our government based on sincerity. Tikakamba kuti ichi chiri so, nichiri so. Kuribati trying to blindfold the people, trying to... No, we are not going to do that. Because, you know, people, when you are truthful to the people, people understand. You understand? We are going through these hardships.
So specifically
and therefore,
to CDF, what will happen in 2026?
So under our manifesto, we are going to replace CDF. And we are going to replace it with the World Development Fund. From CDF to WDF. So that the allocation will not be based on the constituency, but rather on the ward. Because the current model of CDF is problematic structurally for a number of reasons. Number one, the idea of making a member of parliament actively participate in the implementation of petty projects in their constituency takes away their time from their primary duty, because an MP belongs to the legislature. Government has 3 wings. It has the executive, it has the legislature, and it has the judiciary. And there is a reason for this separation of powers. You understand? So the moment, Mr. Mansa, you give a responsibility to implement petty projects in their constituency to an MP, it will take away their time they're supposed to allocate to formulating and implementing proper laws. And that is why, if you make an observation, a critical observation, you realize that most of the laws which were passed from 2021 have actually gone back to Parliament for an amendment. You know, when you pass a law and you put enough thought in it, it's supposed to last forever. It's supposed to last until things change, until the environment changes, maybe 20, 30, 40 years. Then you're supposed to say, no, this law has outlived its usefulness, let's revise. But if you're going to be revising and amending laws, which you enacted 2 years ago, it means that your MPs, your members of parliament, are not paying enough attention to the enactment of those laws. So that's the first problem.
They've been responsive to the everyday challenges.
No, things can change within a year or two.
but
it doesn't make it means you didn't anticipate enough. But let me address the other challenge.
Yes, I'd like to interrogate some of the things that you've mentioned here. So you're saying that CDF will now be allocated towards, as opposed to constituencies.
Yes.
So will the amounts reduce to these specific wards, because some constituencies have got so many wards?
Yes. So
how would the allocation look like?
Yes. So, you know, you've raised a very important point. So you find that under CDF, you realize that one of the complaints that people make is that they say, develop understand? So when you allocate resources for the ward constituency, some constituencies have as many as 20 wards. And you find that resources will be channeled towards the wards which are close to the home of the MP, unfortunately, to the exclusion of other wards. But when you make an allocation based on the wards, you split that total amount and allocate it to the individual wards, you can be guaranteed that the entire constituency will be developed, because each and every ward will have something to benefit from. That is number one. Number two, when you allocate to the wards as opposed to the constituency, you are putting the local authority to be fully in charge, and not only in charge, but also to hold the councillors accountable. Remember that the councillors sit in the council chamber. You remember? Yes. So when you allocate resources to the wards, and each of these wards is represented by a councillor, and these councillors sit in the council chamber, there is a platform to hold councillors accountable in terms of implementation of WDF projects in their respective wards, which is not feasible if you take the approach of CDF as opposed to WDF as proposed by ourselves in the Patriots for Economic Progress. Yes.
So technically, it will still remain 40 million kwacha.
Well, it may remain the same, it may be increased, it may be reduced, it will depend on the circumstances on the ground. But assuming it remains the same, then we'll get that 40 million and split it across the wards which make up that constituency.
There's a thought around CDF by other people that why don't we allocate CDF in terms of needs? For example, Lusaka, I'll give an example of Mnali constituency that is probably more developed than some constituency, you know, in the village. Why give the same amount to Lusaka and the same amount to a village in the constituency that is not as developed as Lusaka? Others have proposed that perhaps we may need to be giving more money to constituencies that are less developed. What are your thoughts on that as PEP?
That's something worth considering. It's something, if when we form government, we would consider that proposal. But I want to emphasize a certain point, Mr. Mansa. You know, my view is that, because when you look at the structure of government, as emphasized by the decentralization policy, which our colleagues in the UPND, by the way, have failed to implement, you have roles which are supposed to be played by the central government, okay? And then you have laws which are supposed to be played by the local government, okay? So you need to be very systematic. You need to have a deliberate policy of segregating the different responsibilities and the different priorities. Which priorities are we going to give to local government and therefore CDF or WDF in our case? And which responsibilities are still going to remain with the central government and therefore respective ministries, let's say Ministry of Infrastructure and Housing and so on and so forth. You understand? My observation has been that our brothers and sisters in the UPND have been so taken with the concept of CDF that they've abrogated the responsibilities of what the central government is supposed to do, and they've pushed everything to local government under CDF, which shouldn't be the case, because there are certain projects. For instance, when you talk about infrastructure projects, bridges, for instance, you saw pictures and videos of a bridge in southern province, Nega, which was done under CDF, and you can tell this is about to collapse. Not even a coach car can pass here. You saw that video, I'm sure. So certain projects, certain responsibilities, let's say construction of bridges, you can't delegate them to that level, the local government level. They need to be done at central government level so that there can be proper supervision of quantity surveyors, you know, architects, civil engineers, structural engineers, and you can produce durable quality projects. Because remember, Mr. Mansa, you are spending taxpayers' money. Okay, so my view has been that when you spend taxpayers' money, you should ensure there's durability. You've seen the infrastructure projects that the KK implemented. Most of them are still there, standing strong. You go to the police camp there at Skanze, you see those Tuma houses, standing very strong. Other houses are done by CDF. When the wind comes, they are blown away. Those Tuma houses are very strong. Even when you want to put a picture frame there, you're trying to hit the nail in the wall, your steel nail will bend and break. Why? Because there were quality infrastructure projects. You understand? And me, that is my belief. When you spend taxpayers' money, okay, when you spend taxpayers' money, you should produce a product that is durable, that will stand the test of time, not what is happening under CDF. Because you are impoverishing the Zambian people. Lero Mwamanga school, Mairo, the roof is blown, the wall goes down. Again, you want to take taxpayers' money and build the same school all over again. That is total wastage. It means you don't qualify to be a leader in this country. And that is my view.
As we go into this election, the UPND boasts of a fixed economy. They say we are growing at positive 5.4% in terms of our GDP. Inflation has reduced to 7.1%. The exchange rate has stabilized, and it was described some few months ago as the best performing in the world. The majority of our debt has been restructured. And perhaps these are the numbers that the UPND are going with in this election. They said, look, the fundamentals are pointing in the right direction. What is President Tembo and the Patriots for Economic Progress offering that is better than these numbers that the UPND are giving us?
So you know, there's a complete disconnect between the UPND's idea of developing this country and what the people really need when you tell them that we're going to develop this country. And you asked me a question earlier to say, why wouldn't you work with President Hakainde Hichilema? That is one of the reasons. His understanding of developing Zambia is statistics on a piece of paper. No, we've increased GDP by 5.4%.
Numbers don't lie.
We have reduced inflation by 7.1%. What you understand? Those things are meaningless. If you say you've grown the economy, people need to be able to feel it on the ground. People need to be able to access jobs. People need to be able to sustain their businesses. If you say you've reduced inflation, when you walk into a shop, the prices need to be lower than they were yesterday. They need to be more affordable. If you just have statistics on a piece of paper and it doesn't translate into the lives of the people, remember that you are ruling over people. People who are flesh and blood, people who need to eat daily, people who fall sick, people who need to go to the hospital, people who need to take their children to school. People. Always remember that. You are ruling over people. So when you say, I've brought development in this country, has that development translated into any positive improvements on the people? The people. If it hasn't, and it's just a statistic on a piece of paper, then crumble it and throw it in the bin because it is meaningless. And that is why, you know me, I like to interact with people. Not these intellectuals who believe they're the only ones who have knowledge. No, just common people, common Zambians. You interact with them. You ask them, oh, so mushta chani panyumba, mukarapo wangati panyumba. No, panyumba inena amuna wanga then tina wana wali 5. Oh, amuna wana washta chani. Ah, amuna wanga wamashitako chetu ma piecework. Oh, okay. Ime mushta chani. Ah, ineni magulisa pa market. Oh, okay. Wana washta chani. Ah, mwana umazi as of I don't remember grade 12, but my results are reporting because we haven't paid school fees. Oh, okay, number 2. So you understand people's dynamics. Oh, so I'm now how much time my piecework before my piecework, so you realize that a typical family is
for that child, obviously, maybe they're at a private school because if they're at a government school, education is free to them.
No. The exam fees are not free of charge. You understand? You still need to pay exam fees. And, in addition to being a politician, I'm also a businessman. I'm an employer. Okay. And I interview a lot of these people. A lot of, I'll tell you that when I do interviews for these like interns and so on and so forth, you'll find that more than 50%, maybe more than 60% of these interns who recently completed school, they don't have their grade 12 results. And the reason they don't have grade 12 results is because they haven't paid the fees to the school. So the school couldn't release to them. Okay.
At grade 12 level?
Yes, at grade 12 level. A lot of them, more than, I would say even more than 70%. Okay. So when you find someone who actually attaches a copy of their grade 12 results, maybe they completed in the last 3-4 years, plus or minus, and you ask them their dynamics, you'll find that, oh, okay, the father works a reasonably good job.
I'd love to, verify that.
So that's the reality. But the bottom line,
I think what government has communicated is that school fees have been scrapped off at grade 7, at grade 9, and at grade 12 level.
So it comes down to my earlier point that our colleagues in the UPND, they premise their model of governance too much on propaganda. You understand? They speak more than they actually do. Okay? So if you were to believe them in terms of their word of mouth 100%, you'd think that things are very good. Zambia is prospering, people are happy. But if you go on the ground and you actually meet and mingle with people, the picture they will give you is totally different. Completely different. Even this initiative, which by the way I believe is a good initiative of school feeding program, they've literally failed to implement it. They failed to implement it because there is no sustainability. Right now they're asking, in some schools, they're asking pupils to say, you need to come with pamela to school, minimum. The only thing they manage to buy in huge quantities, which most schools still have, is beans. Just beans, not even minimum, beans. Not cooking oil, not tomato, nothing else, just beans. And you're saying you're implementing a school feeding program. The model is good, but the actual implementation is poorly done. There is no commitment to allocate adequate resources so that it is properly done. to President Hakainde Hichilema, provided he can do a kwenyu and say, we've introduced a school feeding program. He doesn't care. He doesn't care how well that program is being implemented. He doesn't care whether vantu vamene vapika beans varina tomato, varina onion, or varibe unga.
Do you have testimonies of which particular schools do that? Because some of the schools that we've visited and gone to, one of them is Mnali Boys. This program is very successful.
Do you remember that time the president went to Kabranga Boys to launch the same school feeding program? Do you remember what was served to the kids and to him as well? Do you remember? There are pictures to that. He was just served with beans. There was no mini meal because there wasn't any mini meal. And I'm very happy that the teachers at Kabranga Boys didn't go out of their way and look for meat or mini meal to cook for the president. They cooked exactly what was available. And at that same launch, you had ministers who are now pledging to say, no, we'll bring 4 cattle, we'll bring 3 cattle. No, that's not the point. Your donation is not the point. The point is that government has introduced this policy called the school feeding program, which, by the way, is a good policy. So government must ensure that it is properly implemented. It is adequately resourced. You understand? And when you go into the budget, because me, I spend a lot of time going through a budget, as an input to the production of our alternative budgets, you find that there's an allocation of significant resources towards the school feeding program in the budget, the national budget. So you go on the ground, unga simgura, tomato simgura, salad simgura. But in the budget, there are billions allocated for that purpose. So what is happening to that money? You understand? That's the question. So the bottom line is that the school feeding program is very poorly implemented. And you wonder whether it's incompetence, whether it's propaganda on the part of government. They wanted to do a kwenyu, even if it didn't translate into an actual benefit for the pupils.
What is your suggestion on how it could be made better?
You know, if you remember, Mr. Mansa, if you remember, one of the points I made when we were starting this program, when you were asking me, how are you going to do this as a government, as a PEP government, you as Sean Tembo as president, one of the first things I said was that we are going to be sincere, honest, okay? Not propaganda, not mingalato, just sincerity. We want to deal with them on an honest basis. You understand? Kuribe country libe mavuto in this world, kuribe. You understand? But if we have challenges as a nation, I need to be able to outline them to the people I'm leading and say, fellow Zambians, these are the challenges we are having as a nation, and these are the opportunities we are having as a nation. Copper prices have gone up, blah, 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 blah. Challenges because of the war in the Middle East, fuel prices, blah, blah, blah. You understand? Eh? So this will be the trade-off. Tizashitako apa stinga cheat. Tizashitako napaja, but paja stinga cheat. You need to be honest with the people. And that is something that is lacking with President Hakainde Hichilema. He's not honest with the nation. You understand? He believes in the politics of propaganda. But again, you can't blame him too much because he became president through propaganda. He's a product of propaganda, and therefore he believes that propaganda is the most effective way of doing things.
Earlier on, I asked you around a question around how the economic fundamentals are moving, and what we have on paper and what we can see is that the economic fundamentals are moving in the right direction. Your only problem is that these are not translating to the
those are actually doubtful.
The living standards of our people. I think the question is, if it was a PEP government with these numbers, how will you ensure that they translate to the living conditions of our people?
First of all, those numbers are doubtful, and I don't think they are genuine. For instance,
how is it possible? For example, let's pick for example the exchange rate. It's at 19.8%. You know, to a dollar. How is that not realistic? Because when I walk into a bureau, I'll change my dollar at that amount.
Well, the exchange rate is well and good, but at the end of the day, you know, the question is why is that exchange rate not translating into a reduction of our imported, you know, goods and services? Why is there no impact on that? You understand?
No,
why is there no impact on that?
That older motor vehicles are celebrating now because of this exchange rate.
Yeah, but when you talk about statistics like the inflation rate, first of all, the inflation rate is a figure that the Zamstats tells us, you know, on a monthly basis. The question is, can ZAMSTAs be trusted? You understand? Can ZAMSTAs be trusted? I don't think they can. They are not credible, and they are too partisan in their pronouncements. They try too much to lean towards pleasing the government of the day, and also
How do you qualify that?
Also that
How do you qualify that?
That exchange rate
is partisan.
That's my considered opinion. I wanted to address the issue of the exchange rate. You know, the exchange rate is supposed to be based on free economic fundamentals. Okay. But the exchange rate can also be manipulated. Okay? Can be manipulated. How can it be manipulated? Through the Bank of Zambia releasing excess forex on the market. Then you push the rate down. I'm sure you remember during the PF times when the exchange rate would be rising, and then there's an uproar from the public, and then all of a sudden it drops. You remember those days, eh? Yes. And if you ask me, this reduction in the exchange rate under the UPND government in the past couple of months, it's also premised not on the economic fundamentals, but on mechanical inducement on the part of the central bank, the Bank of Zambia. I'll tell you why I say that. You know, an exchange rate, if it is based on economic fundamentals, is supposed to be smooth. Okay, it's not supposed to be shocked, unless there is an economic shock, and we haven't had economic shocks in this country for a while. So if it is rising based on economic fundamentals, it's supposed to rise like that, smoothly, it's rising. Okay, and if those economic fundamentals become weak and it is dropping, it is supposed to drop, you know, gradually, smoothly. It's dropping. You understand? But when you look at the exchange rate that we have, and you look at the graph of that on the Bank of Zambia website, you find that the exchange rate goes like, you understand? And when it's dropping, it's going like that. You know, so that shows you that it's not based on economic fundamentals. It's based on a mechanical inducement by the central bank. Only that perhaps the UPND have refined, the Bank of Zambia under UPND have refined the art of trying to manipulate the exchange rate than the Bank of Zambia under the Patriotic Front. Because under the Patriotic Front, these fluctuations were much larger. You understand? They were much larger. Whereas under UPND, they are not so large. But you can see this is a fluctuation. Today, the kwacha will be at 19.2. Tomorrow, you open, it's a Monday, you find the kwacha is at 18.9. And then the following day, it will be 19.1. The other day, 19.3. Then the other day, it will be 18.8. You understand? So economic fundamentals don't move so quickly on a daily basis. They are more gradual. So I've got no doubt in my mind that these appreciations are actually based on mechanical inducements by the Bank of Zambia, so that they try to paint a picture on the part of government to say it has worked and they've managed to reduce the exchange rate.
Well, what is the PEP government promising in terms of fundamentally working on the macroeconomic indicators?
So, you know, any economy, Mr. Mansa, for you to develop an economy, you need stability of the key economic factors. Okay, not fluctuations, but stability, so that people can plan, business players can make decisions. Then you grow the economy. There has never been stability in this country ever since the UPND has came into office. Not only in terms of exchange rate, not only in terms of other fundamentals, but even basic things like fuel. You've got a government which has adopted a policy of revising fuel prices on a monthly basis. So this time fuel is here, next month is there, the other month is there. There's too much fluctuation. So when you have too many fluctuations in key economic factors, you can't grow the economy, because the economy is made up of various entities who make decisions based on the economic fundamentals. And when the fundamentals are fluctuating too much, they will not want to make long-term decisions. They will just be making short-term decisions. And they will not make a decision of whether to set up a factory here and increase their production, because that will take a couple of years. They don't know where the economy is going, and they'll just make short-term decisions, you understand? So when the economic players are making short-term decisions, the economy can grow. You need to create that comfort to economic players for them to make long-term economic decisions for the economy to grow. And that only comes about when there is stability. So under a PEP government, talk about fuel prices, for instance. We'll be reviewing fuel prices. We'll start with once every 6 months. And with the passage of time, maybe in our 3rd or 4th year in office, we'll reduce that to once per year, so that we revise fuel prices once every year on the first day of the year. And the MMD started that model, and they came up with the structure and the tools for that. They came up with the Fuel Stabilization Fund, okay? Fuel Stabilization Fund. When the ERB was just established under a gentleman who I used to work with at PricewaterhouseCoopers, called Chingambo, something like that. He was the first chairman of the ERB. And the model they came up was a splendid model. It was based on the scenario whereby if oil prices on the world market are higher than our local pump prices, then we get resources from that Fuel Stabilization Fund and subsidize. When fuel prices on the world market are lower than our pump prices, we actually get those surpluses and take in the reserve. So at any given time, that Fuel Stabilization Fund is well resourced to counter any fluctuations, so that for our domestic purposes, the prices of fuel are stable over a longer period of time, as opposed to a situation whereby when there is uncertainty in the Middle East, fuel prices go up, then we also increase fuel prices. When Trump says we are signing a ceasefire, fuel prices go down, then again we reduce fuel prices. When Trump says no, the ceasefire has failed, we are going to bomb Iran into kingdom come, then prices go up on the world market the way they've gone up today, because the Vice President of America failed to secure a ceasefire. You find that also we increase fuel prices. You can't have a local economy subjected to the fluctuations of the world economy. You need to create stability to grow the economy. As simple as all that. It's not really rocket science, if you ask me. Any decent economist is supposed to know and understand that. The challenge we have is that we have a lot of professionals who are not able to question the political leaders. So whatever the political leader says, they just say, yes, Bwana. And yet this guy is a qualified professional, probably even has a PhD, but he can't challenge his political leader and tell him, Bwana Minister or Bwana President, what you're proposing will damage the economy. You don't have that culture. Under my presidency, I'll create that culture. So
technically, what you're explaining is that there's going to be a subsidy that will ensure that it cushions the impact in an event that the prices in the international market rises.
Yes, but not just a subsidy. There are times when prices fall. Remember during COVID times in 2020? Yeah, during COVID, the price of oil on the world market was negative. Okay, what it means for the price to be negative is that when you go to Saudi Arabia or go to Qatar or go to Bahrain, instead of you paying to get oil, they'll pay you to get their oil. You know why? Because there was very little demand, and they were afraid of their oil wells flooding. And when their oil wells flood, it means it will damage a lot of their equipment and it will take forever to repair them. So they had to keep pumping the oil out. So they pump it out. Take it where? They can't just pump it into the desert. They'll create an environmental disaster. So they had to give it to someone. So those countries which had enough storage capacity for oil went there, and instead of buying the oil by paying money, they were paid to get the oil. So imagine Zambia had huge storage capacity. Would have collected a lot of oil that time. And then, of course, as the pump price, we were still buying during COVID, isn't it? We never had a time when we were getting fuel free of charge. So you make a supernormal profit during that time, and you get that money put in this Fuel Stabilization Fund. When fuel prices fluctuate, maybe because there's conflict in the Middle East, then you get some resources from the fund and do a subsidy to ensure there is a smooth smoothing of the fuel prices.
So you support the intervention by government to suspend the excess duty and zero rate the value-added tax for for the fuel that we're going to be having for the next 3 months?
Yeah, of course. There's nothing wrong with that initiative. It's a welcome initiative. Although, in my considered view, I don't know when they will put that into effect, whether it was with immediate effect or not.
Immediate effect.
Yeah, because, you know, when you look at the taxes in our fuel value chain, they make up more than 40% of the pump price of fuel. You understand? So, if indeed government had removed those taxes, the levy, the value-added tax, and so on and so forth, we were not supposed to have that increment that we had. We were actually supposed to have a reduction. So maybe the implementation of the removal of those taxes is gradual. It wasn't like all of it at once, maybe, but they didn't disclose that, so we can only speculate. But if those taxes were removed, then in the last revision of fuel prices, we were not supposed to have an increment. We were supposed to have a reduction.
As to conclude, every year thousands of young people are graduating from colleges and universities, but the formal economy isn't growing fast enough to absorb all of them. What is your blueprint as Patriots for Economic Progress and President Tembo to create employment for the first 5 years of you being in government?
Yeah, so our viewpoint is that employment creation is a twofold issue, and it goes hand in hand with the promotion of entrepreneurial activities. You understand? Because when you create a conducive environment for an entrepreneur to start a business, you are promoting entrepreneurship, yes, but you are also creating employment. Because the person who is going to start his own business is employing himself, isn't it? Yes, so they've created employment for themselves. You understand? So our view is that the most sure way to ensure employment creation is not necessarily focusing your energies on trying to attract these multinationals through foreign direct investment, you know, FDI. You create, you know, tax-free economic zones where people invest, they don't pay tax. No. That one would only address a small fraction of the issue of unemployment. The most sure way, in our considered view as Patriots for Economic Progress, to create employment is to actually go flat out and encourage entrepreneurship. Not only encouraging it, but you create the conducive environment for entrepreneurs to thrive and prosper. Okay. When you do that, the private sector has got unlimited capacity to create employment. All these children you see around here can be taken away, you understand, such that employees will start bargaining at their workplaces. This person is a bricklayer. He tells the boss, boss, you're paying me 6,000 a month, and other people have offered me 8,000 a month. So I don't know what you think about it. If you are willing to revise my salary, I'll stay. If not, I'm going. And then the employer says, okay, we'll start paying you 8,500. That's the way the economy functions out there. You know why? Because there are so many entrepreneurial players in the private sector to the extent that there is a high demand for skills. You understand?
Have you done your mathematics to give us an estimation of how many jobs probably would be created as a result of those initiatives?
So one of the points I made, Mr. Mansa, is that the private sector has got unlimited capacity to absorb everybody who is looking for a job. Everybody. So the main focus of my government will be to create a conducive environment for the private sector to thrive and prosper, as well as to capacitate upcoming entrepreneurs to enter into the private sector. So perhaps your next question would be, how are you going to achieve that? How are you going to do that? How are we going to create that conducive environment for the private sector to thrive and prosper? We need to look at the bottlenecks which are there. And I must mention that, on the issue of creating a conducive economic environment for the private sector, I'm very disappointed with the failure of President Hakainde Hichilema to achieve that, primarily because he spent a lot of time in the private sector. He knows the challenges that the private sector faces. So you know the challenges, you are subjected to those challenges, and then you are lucky enough to ascend to the presidency, and you don't want to resolve those challenges. You are quiet about it, you just watch. That's very unfortunate. So I'll answer my own question. What would the PEP government do to ensure that we create a conducive environment for the private sector? Number one of the biggest bottlenecks that the private sector faces is lack of access to affordable financing. I want to underline the word affordable. Okay? Affordable financing. When you go to a typical bank, any bank or macro lender, you borrow at not less than 25%, 30%. That's very high. You go to neighboring countries, you go to Zimbabwe, you know, the monetary policy rate there is around 7-8%. Banks are lending at MPR plus 0.5, so they're lending at about 8.5 to 9%. The same as South Africa, the same as Namibia, the same as Botswana, the same as Tanzania. So there, entrepreneurs are able to go to a bank and use their house as security, borrow money. You're paying 9% interest on the money. You go and start a business. All of us have business ideas. If you go to Memorial Park there, you see those tombstones. A lot of those people died with brilliant business ideas. They couldn't implement them. You know why? Because they didn't have financing. We lack financing. And that is the reason why, Mr. Mansa, foreigners are able to come to Zambia. They borrow money from their country. They are not rich per se. They just borrow also from their countries. Although they borrow at a lower rate, their countries, they can be able to borrow at a lower rate. So they borrow from their countries. Come to Zambia and start any business, whether it's brick making, whether it is trucking, whether it is gold mining, any business, and they prosper. Whether it is real estate, they come, invest, and prosper. You know why? Because there is no competition locally. No Zambian will put up a shopping mall. Why? Because you can't go to a bank and borrow money and put up a shopping mall. The rate that the bank will give you will be ridiculous. You need to be involved in something illegal for you to pay that high interest rate, unless you are in drug trafficking or maybe some other illegal activity for you to make such supernormal profits. So that is where the problem is. And my government will address that. That is number one. So there, it gives birth to another problem, if you allow me to explain.
Lastly, yes.
The issue of high interest rates, we are saying we'll address it. So how are we going to address the issue of high interest rates? Why are they high interest rates in the first place in Zambia? Why is it that our neighboring countries have lower interest rates? We have high interest rates. That's a fundamental question which needs to be answered. We have high interest rates here in Zambia primarily because the government borrows too much from local financial institutions, okay, through domestic debt. When PF left in 2021, our domestic debt was standing at about 92 billion kwacha. Right now, you can go to the Ministry of Finance website. Our domestic debt has risen from about 92 billion kwacha to about 255 billion kwacha over a period of less than 5 years. 255, increasing by almost, 2.5 times. Okay, that's a lot. What that means is that when government borrows from the local private, financial institutions through instruments such as treasury bills, through instruments such as government bonds, they are wiping out liquidity from the entire financial markets and keeping it to themselves. Because our economy is small. When a single player called government borrows that huge amount, 255 billion kwacha, they would have wiped out all the liquidity and kept it to themselves. So each of these financial institutions, whether it is insurance companies or pension funds or commercial banks, they've got very little left. When you, Mr. Mansa, you want to go and borrow, they've got very little because there's a lot of other people who want to borrow. So they will tell you, we can give it to you at 2%. That's what pushes interest rates up. The high appetite of government to borrow from the local financial sector, and my government will change that.
Patriot for Economic Progress President, Mr. Tembo, thank you so much for attending Costa's cross-examination and speaking to the Zambians tonight.
Thank you, and a very good evening to the people out there.
All the best ahead of the elections on the 13th of August.
Thank you. We are confident we are going to form government. Maybe not in the first round, but definitely in the second round, we shall form government.
There's going to be a second round?
Yes, because there's no way that UPND can score 50% plus one. Again, on the other hand, it's unlikely that any of the opposition leaders would score 50% plus one, because we're going to split the vote, of course. I don't expect less than 20 candidates on the presidential ballot. So the first round, it will go to a rerun, and then in the rerun, we'll have 2 candidates, and I'm confident I'll be one of those 2. And most likely, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema will be the other candidate. And then at that particular time, we're going to ensure that we score a definite victory, because there's no way that people who would have voted against Mr. Hakainde Hichilema in the first round will end up voting for him in the second round. It doesn't work like that anyway.
That's our discussion. Thank you so much for being part of it.
Thank you.
We'll see you again next Sunday.
There's a new wave sweeping across the nation, a youthful, vibrant spirit driven by the passion for a taste that boosts our inner well-being. A taste crafted in the heart of sun-kissed fields from Zambia's finest sorghum. A taste driven by the passion to boost your inner well-being. It's who we are, how we are, and where we've come from. Sogo, the new taste of culture.
Ilio tulesunga mbina ukusala kwa chinkumbawile mu mwaka wa 2026 mu mwezi wa Kasakantobo. Arana tuishiba muleka biro kuishibilapo ifingi ifile chitika muchalo. Mulandu wine kunonga ndamula basawafi kope kumusanza natumiletera programu ya Natulande. Pari hii programu twakula leta intunguru shacharo isha pusana ukuti bengesa asuka amepusho ya abantu ayalekanalekana. Tunapeleshi wiku bantu. Nokupera akashita kuntungurushi ukuti bengesa asuka amepusho y'abantu. Ukulanda pamadyashi ayakakata ubunonshi bwa chalo amadyashi y'abumi amasambiriro ukunina kwa fintu imitengo mu chalo eriyo na fimbipo. Turachecheta abo abalefu okuyiminina ukuti bengatungurire chalo n'okubepusha amepusho ayakakata. Pyonsefi twakula miletela mu lulimi lwenu. Natulande pano pene pamusanza TV. Ukutungirira ichifyalirwa munshira iyalekanalekana. Ukupera amaka ukupitira mukulanshanya ukuafikapo. Tulesangwa patopsa pa channel number 93.
Mama twapatira abwera
ndani bigiriko ndiye njani
iwe wamena anasilota ng'ombe na mbai
leka chibwere okay bigiriko we are very idiots bigiriko
tele bigiriko ari kunuma
ababada bigiriko
I am not Big Nico.
huh?
Big Nico is my boss.
Wabikabu studying umwene wa film tarachana presents you bandits. Alikwizo oyo ita wildcat chona wa mtengere.
Chona wa mtengere simu.
Hey, what up? What up? Bwana wa Mtengeri, everyone.
Wildcat Energy Drink. Untamed energy.
Pascal's showing his boss the efficient new technology they've installed. She is pleased, but now she's asking, why is that still there? Pascal explains that the wells can store many, many messages. The boss is not so pleased anymore. If you haven't upgraded your contact center yet, it's time to get business done better with MTN Business.
Doesn't matter big or small. Choco Loco. Choco Loco is for all. Choco one thing that I like it. And I'm gonna tell everybody.
Choco Loco Choco Sticks. Long-lasting fun.
Fruity, fruity, fruity.
12 fruits and 11 vitamins to keep you healthy and fine. So let us all have a fruitful day. Your lunchtime companion also comes in mango and guava.
Chop some onions. Ah, pinto. Into the pot. Delicious. Sprinkle some spring onion.
Have you heard about the lady who knows how to cook? She makes the best noodles with the special look. She adds to veggie, spices and meats, and serves them hot and fresh down in every street.